Hello and welcome to Shadow Mountain Publishing. We are excited to have you join us with this amazing connecting conversation that we're about to have. We know we're going to have a connecting conversation. Just in the prep we've done for this conversation and interview today, I'm excited to introduce you to Julie Wright, amazing author, mother, grandmother, caregiver, and author. And I'm so grateful. Did I say author twice, Julie?
You might have, I don't know.
Okay. Well, full disclosure, it's going to be an authentic conversation. That means I may repeat myself or not have the right words to say what I want to say. I'm Ganel-Lyn Condie. For those of you that don't know me, I'm also an author and show host and media contributor and mental health advocate. And I'm so excited for the conversation we're having today, especially given that in September, we get to focus on mental health and suicide prevention specifically. For those of you that are familiar with me, my story, you know that suicide prevention, suicide grief, and mental health tools are close to my heart. And this book that is kind of the thing that brought us together today, but we're going to go in whatever directions we want to go in today, is exactly within that vein and in such an important conversation. And Julie, I love the cover. Do you want to, I can see it right over your shoulder.
Oh, this was a gift a friend of mine gave me. She made a little plaque with it, and it makes my heart so happy. Yeah, I love the cover. I I'm not ashamed to admit I cried a little bit when I saw it for the first time. I feel like it really captured the essence and the soul of the book.
And as an author, we don't always get to make sure the cover is exactly what we want or the title is what we want. And so from author to author, we really do have a lot in common today. So I'm excited to talk about this, but let's stay on the topic of the cover really quickly. And the title, Swimming in a Sea of Stars, I think, especially when we're talking about the subject of mental health, it is a sea of emotions and people and experiences and stories. Where did this title come from in your writing of this book?
Well, the book actually, the original thought process was I was basing it around a poem, Not Waving but Drowning by Stevie Smith. She's a British author, poet. And as I read that poem, I felt like I very much related to the person who was drowning. They're not dead. They weren't waving from the ocean. They were drowning, and everybody on the shoreline waved back, hi, 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 and they're like, I wasn't waving, I was drowning. And I felt that to my core when I read that poem for the very first time, because so often I deal with mental health issues and challenges on my own, and I feel often like I'm drowning, and I feel like I'm waving to get attention to people on the shore. And then one day it hit me that we're all in the same ocean, and we're all drowning, and there's nobody on the shore. We're all drowning in our own sort of way, and we're treading water, and we're trying to stay afloat. And that was kind of where this book came in for me. And my product director, he wrote me and my product manager, we had a little email conversation at like 2 a.m. I don't know what we were all doing up, but he was the one. He's like, I think we need to brainstorm titles. And then this is the one that he came up with. He's like, but something like that, but come up with some other titles. And we batted around a few others. And then I stopped and I'm like, wait. You actually already came up with the perfect title when you sent the original email. And I think we should just stick with that, because that really, I feel, embodies the entire concept of we're swimming, and we're not drowning. We are swimming, and we're making it work, and we're not going to let the waves roll us over a coral reef where we get all scratched up and beat up and drown. We're going to swim. And that's the ultimate theme, I guess, of the book, is we're not drowning, we're going to swim. So I loved the title. I think that he did a great job with that.
Well, I love the title too. And I love the idea of that concept of who we think is struggling with mental health and who we think is doing fine. And that poem is such a beautiful way and kind of where you pick up the at the beginning of the book, right? That sometimes we think people are doing great and they're swimming, and yet oftentimes we find out later that they were drowning. And yet we need to give some generous assumptions that all of us are in this same sea. And especially post COVID, I would say all of us should be talking about mental health as much as we're talking about the show we're binging on our favorite platform, or the favorite restaurant we just visited, or right. For me, mental health is health. And it's part of my self conversation every day. Every day I wake up, and because of my family dynamics and my chronic illness, and the dynamics in our family with me losing a sister to suicide 9 years ago, I ask myself that literal question, like, what does support look like, and where am I at mental health wise? One of the things I'd love to start with is specifically just a shout out and a praise to you, Julie, for taking such a complex subject on. You've written a lot of books, and this is a gnarly set of weeds to get caught into, so to speak. The analogy for myself is that I can get caught in the weeds. What I love about this book and the character development is that you take a very complex issue and you don't oversimplify it, but you create bite-sized experiences so that we can kind of see mental health from all the different angles that we're all experiencing from. Can you talk a little bit about maybe where, as an author, and I know I do this myself, where your own personal story intersects with some of these characters and the way in which you decided to kind of address such a complex issue, from the main character who has attempted suicide and is finding herself, Addison, coming back to school, to all of these other characters around her that are addressing their own mental health?
So my personal story is I lost a friend to suicide when I was fairly young. I was a teenager, and I can't even hear a song. There was a particular song that he played over and over again, and this is back. I'm old, so this is back in the day of tape cassettes. And
hey, we're only a year apart. I'm right with you.
yeah, this is back in the day of tapes, and I could see he had beautiful hands, these long white fingers. Just I could see him pressing rewind and play on the tape cassette, and as he would play this song over and over and over again, and I cannot hear that song now without just feeling that just incredible hole that he left in my life, that he's not here anymore. And but more so, this personally, I dealt with my own mental health issues. And when I was very young, I didn't recognize it as depression at the time. It took me actually a lot of years to realize that was an issue for me. Even in spite of this issue, I never gave it that name. I'm like, I'm fine. Everybody feels like this. Well, no, everybody doesn't feel like this, I guess, but maybe they do. I don't know. But I had an issue where it was a very dark day for me, and I had gotten into a fight with my parents, and they'd left. It was my birthday. It was just not a great day. And I was being, to be fair to my parents, I was being very difficult. And I at the time, I felt like everything was on them. But now that I'm a grown up and have some better perspective, I see my own hand in all of that. But I had just gone to a very dark place, and I had made a plan that I wasn't going to make it to tomorrow. I had an exit strategy, and I was in the middle of this whole scenario, and the phone rang, and it felt almost like I was in a trance, if that makes any sense. And the phone ringing yanked me out. It was like somebody snapped their fingers and wake up, and it woke me up. And I answered the phone, and there was a woman on the other end that said, "Hi, Julie. This is Sister Moffat from your church. I know you're having a bad day today. I will be by to pick you up in 5 minutes. Please put a dress on." And I was actually, in spite of the fact that I just gotten into a fight with my parents, I was a pretty obedient child. So when an adult says, "I'm coming to get you, put a dress on," I'm like, okay. And so she picked me up, and she literally saved my life that day, because I had a plan and I was in the process of executing said plan. And I wasn't going to be sloppy about it. I had every intention of succeeding in this plan. And it was a miraculous thing. And I look back on that day often in my life now. And I think of all of the things that I would have missed if I had made it, if I had carried out my plan. I would have missed out on some gorgeous sunsets and some amazing moonrises and rainbows and waterfalls and grandbaby giggles and throwing a ball for my dog. And there's so many gorgeous things in the world I would have missed. And making out with my husband, which I'm a huge fan of. I mean, there's so much I would have missed.
Yes, I love that. I love your transparency, and can I just highlight something here, especially with it being September and Suicide Prevention Month? There's something specific about the age you were at when you had that experience. The teenage brain is not fully developed, and that frontal cortex decision-making part of the brain, I often say when I'm speaking in schools or working with youth or teenagers and parents too that are trying to understand their children's mental health, is that a child of that age, and I'm guessing those teen years, right, make a decision within 15 minutes. And so your description of being in the trance and having this person from your church reach out right at the exact moment, I think that's so key, because I often tell teenagers 15 minutes later from making a decision that could change your life forever, you may feel very different about things. And you don't literally have the brain development yet to understand what you were just describing, Julie, which is future hope. And in the middle of our darkness, it's hard to sometimes, when we're swimming and we think we're drowning, to pull your title into this. We don't always see those future sunsets or giggles or makeout sessions or grandbabies. We don't see the hope because we see and feel the pain that we're drowning in. And I love that there was an angel sent to you at that moment. I think for our family too, as I watched my own sister battle her mental health, the people in her life that were her support struggle to this day with, why didn't I call? Why didn't I go over? And so I want to be sensitive to those in the audience that may be listening to this, thinking, well, I didn't get that prompting to call that person that I now loved. And that you've experienced as well with your school friend that died by suicide, that sometimes we don't have those magic phone calls or those interruptions in our thought processes. And sometimes we do. And I think when we're having a conversation like this, I love talking about all of that there is hope in the future. And for those of us struggling, we know people struggling. So all the helpers need the help, right? So sometimes we don't call because we're the ones drowning. Do you have any thoughts on that? And maybe share a character that kind of you brought that theme into, because I see where you have helped the readers start to have a sense into the popular guy who's popular on YouTube is dealing with his own mental health. The girl that's got the alcoholic mom that's abusive and has really bad boyfriends hanging around, everyone assumes she's the suicidal person, right? We all have these stories in our head, and we don't realize sometimes someone else's story right next door to us is playing so loudly. Where have you interwoven your own experience and that miracle and that hope that you were given as a gift to what's in the book?
There was a moment. Addison is I call her our main character, and yet we really see her only peripherally. And yet she is the main character. She is the one who attempted suicide. It's her first day back at school. And as she goes throughout her day, she's not 100% sure she's giving tomorrow a chance. She's still not dedicated to the idea of tomorrow. And she has no commitment involved in that. And yet, as she goes throughout the day, lots of experiences happen. Like she just meets a girl in the hall who says, "I'll see you later." And later on, she's like, "I'll see you later. I'll see you later." That's a lot to assume for anybody right now, that I'm going to be around later to see. And yet she says, "Oh, okay." And she says that even by saying that, she felt like she'd made some sort of promise that I am going to be around later to see. And yet at the same token, she's the one who needs help. She's the one who is, like I said, she's not committed to tomorrow. And yet she offers help to so many other people. So the concept of this book is that this is all takes place in one day, and every chapter begins with Addison's journal entry. She's
Which
not
I
just about
love, by the way, because it's a tool, a mental health tool from the get-go that you're giving the reader. And her therapist is asking her to do it, but I love that you have woven this mental health tool in.
yeah, that she goes through every, so every chapter begins with her journal entry because the therapist tells her anytime you're worried or stressed or have any issues, write it down and we'll talk about it. So she does this. And so with each journal entry, you see a little bit more of her story, and that, but the chapter is never from her point of view. The chapter is from the point of view of one of four other students that because she existed in the school that day, she made their lives so much better. So yeah, she's the one who needs help. And she was also the one giving help, because I think that's who we all are and how we all are. We all need help. And yet we all have the power to give help at the same time. And if she hadn't been there, how different that day would have looked for everybody else. As she hands over a hoodie to Celia in the bathroom when Celia is dealing with her abuse. And
Oh my gosh.
she gives back a bookmark to Damien, who his mom has Alzheimer's and he's dealing with being forgotten. So yeah, he's YouTube famous and he's a star, but he's dealing with a lot of his own drama, and he a lot of his own mental health issues. And she hands it back and she's like, it's not about, who remembers you, it's about who you remember. And all of the little advice that she gives throughout the day, and yet she's the one that we are focusing on. Is she or isn't she going to stay? And yet she's turning around, just scattering sunshine everywhere she goes, and yet she's living under her own rain cloud.
There's so many gems. Like we could have hours of conversations, and I hope we will someday. But I love that you bring up Damien and his dynamic, because I think you address a really important issue in the book, which is especially a certain generation. You and I grew up in the 80s where we had to go back to school, and by Wednesday at lunch we would find out if we didn't get invited to the party this last weekend that already happened. Versus our kids grew up with, like, in live time, people are posting and giving feedback about what's happening that they're not included in. Damien is very transparent internally about the hit he gets emotionally from the comments he gets on social media and the praise that he gets. And do you want to talk anything about specifically, because I do think social media and mental health, especially with our teens, is crucial if we're going to have a conversation around suicide prevention. Do you want to expand on that at all?
I think social media is amazing and brilliant and terrifying and frightening and scary and horrible. It is all of those things. It can be such a great tool, and yet it only shows a curated look of what people want you to see about them. So like if you look at my social media, I seem so happy all the time and everything's great. But the reality is so different. If you looked at my day, it's the days where things aren't great. I have a chronic illness, and there are days where I literally cannot get out of bed. My legs don't work. They just stop functioning for the day. And yet that's not stuff you really see. And I'm trying really hard to be more transparent and be more open about who I am. But it's kind of this bizarre facade where it is, you feel like this, I'm missing out on everything. I'm missing out on the party that's going on. Like you said, they're dealing with it in real time, and all their friends are posting about it, and they're sitting at home going, well, I'm not at that party.
Yeah.
Oh, well, what's wrong with me? And it makes you second guess. And then you think, are the people who are at that party, are they really all that happy anyway? And because sometimes I've been at the party and I'm like, hey, look, I'm right here. I'm having such a good time. And in reality, I'm thinking, man, I wish I was home with my fuzzy bunny slippers. Okay, that's a lie. I don't actually own fuzzy bunny slippers. Mine are acorn shaped, but that's so, I wish I was at home with my slippers and my hot chocolate and curled up in my favorite blanket, and not here, because sometimes the social dealing is just too hard. So, but social media I think it's important that we recognize that it's not everything that we think it is. What we see
Yes.
necessarily the whole story. And Damien's story is everybody thinks he's got his whole life all together. And he's filled up by all of those likes, that the likes and the approvals and the good comments, they're his drug. And yet Damien deals with a lot of stress at home. He has responsibilities that are just unreal for a kid to have put on his shoulders, and yet he's dealing with all of this and nobody knows. They kind of want to see him fail because they're, oh look, his life is so perfect.
They're jealous of the curated version of him. Yeah. You know what I love too? I love that you talk about it being a drug, and we literally have scientific evidence of the dopamine hit that comes from the likes and the comments and the praise. And I do think it's so crucial that you just talked about that fear of the social anxiety. I just literally posted on social media about this amazing event I got to go to. And then the next day I posted about social anxiety of going to events and what my 3 tips were, because everyone assumes I'm this extrovert that wants to hang out at these big events all the time, and I speak to thousands of people and I'm fine, but I can get in my head, and I call it my junior high brain, where who am I going to sit with? Who am I going to talk to? And, so I just think that that is such an important point to note, that our children are navigating their mental health while their brains are still developing with a tool that is so powerful for good and so powerful for not good in their life if they don't use it like a tool. Can I read to you your own words that you said this beautiful thing, and it's an Addison journal entry, where I would love for you to kind of take this thought and then share whatever you would like. And this is where her therapist has asked her, she's debating, do I go back to school after Christmas break when everyone's coming back to school, or do I go back to school today? And she's very aware that her mom is trying to go to work and can't take time off. And so she's struggling to go back to school, but she's going, and she's talking about fear. And she says, what am I afraid of? I can almost hear the therapist asking me that question. What are you afraid of, Addison? Everything. I'm afraid everyone will notice my return. I'm afraid no one will notice. I'm afraid I'll be assigned to someone so they can babysit me. I'm afraid of everything. And I just think what we were just talking about with social media, with social situations, with all of us, no matter our age, I meet 80-year-olds that are still afraid of everything. What would you like to share about that? I just thought that was such beautiful writing that she's writing in her journal, but that we can all relate to, that fear of everything.
Because I relate very much to that. I am afraid of everything. I'm afraid of not being invited to the party or the event. And I'm afraid to go to the party and the event. And like you, I feel like I'm constantly in junior high brain, where I'm standing there with my tray in the lunchroom wondering who I'm going to sit by, and terrified that if I do sit by anybody, will I say something so stupid that I'll be sorry I sat by anybody? And then I stay up at night just panicked over, oh dear, I did say that out loud. Oh my stars, what was I thinking? And it's not my favorite thing, the fear of everything. And yet I feel like we all are. I feel like everybody is in that same situation. And a long time ago, I was going into an event, a meeting, and I went just a little bit late. And so I went and I sat down, but I didn't sit by anybody. I sat where there were deliberately empty seats all around me. And that was comfortable for me. And then another woman who came in just a little bit later than me sat in front of me in the empty row there. And then I felt horrible. It's like, why didn't she sit by me? There's tons of empty seats next to me. She could have sat by me. I thought her and I were friends. And I sat there and panicking over the fact that, because I'm all self-absorbed, and yes, it's all about me. But sometimes it's not all about me, because as I watched her throughout the meeting, I noticed her shifting uncomfortably and folding her arms and crossing and uncrossing her legs. And I realized she feels like I feel. She's uncomfortable too. And at that moment, I stepped outside of my own brain and realized that it's okay for me to think about other people sometimes. And it's not all about me. And so then I now go to those sorts of meetings, things like that, events. I go late on purpose, just a couple of minutes. And I look around for an empty seat next to somebody else. and I go and I sit by them.
I
Not
love that.
because it's because if I'm uncomfortable and they're uncomfortable, well, let's be uncomfortable together and be friends. That's kind of
That's literally what I posted, that assume when you go to this that everyone's in their junior high brain. And I think that's the power of your book, is that you give the reader a chance to see inside the brains of these teenagers that are all walking around telling themselves a story, living a story, and then watching other people's stories play out in front of them. And they're making the assumptions about what they see, which is what we do as human beings. And so as you were writing this, I think you do such a beautiful job of capturing the teenage voice and not talking down to teens. I get to have teens in my home a lot. I have a 19-year-old and a 25-year-old. I get to speak in schools. And the thing I hear the most is that, you know, 15 to 24-year-olds do not want to be talked to as if they don't have intelligence and perspective and grit and strength. And all of these characters are living through some really heavy, real things. And so I love that you capture their voice, and as a teen reader, you won't be speaking down to them. They will see that there's this kind of respect of your real human beings having real perspective, and you bring value to the world, even if you only have had 16 birthdays or 17 birthdays, right? How have you been able to tap into that teen voice, and what would be some takeaways that you really want to make sure young people feel or experience as they read this book?
so it was a lot of research for me because I'm 51 and I don't, it's been a lot of years since I've been in my teenage years, and I wanted to get it right, especially since I know that from the 80s that I grew up in to now, it's a very different world. And I'm so grateful I did not grow up now in the day of cell phones and things going viral, because I know I would have been a viral meme that would be not awesome and make me cry a lot. So super grateful.
I would have had really big 80s hair in my meme. So I'm with you on that.
I had a mullet.
Oh, you did.
Where was my mother when that happened? That's what I want.
I love it. I love it.
Real evidence of the fact that I have the worst haircut in the world. And I think all the time, why did my mom let me get that haircut? That happened. Anyway, I did a lot of research because I didn't want to get it wrong, and I didn't want it to be dated either. I want this to be something that has a lasting longevity to it. I want it to be something that can go forward in the future and be helpful. So I went to a lot of research and a lot of teenagers through that research. I had a lot of teen readers. I went and I did a lot of interviews with various teenagers and talked about the things that were important to them and the things that mattered to them and the things that they worried about, the things that they were stressed out about. And I was fascinated by the fact that a lot of the things that they worry about and are stressed about are the same things that I am worried about and that I am stressed about. And it's like, wow, there really isn't that age gap that we think that there is. And you think, oh, their lives are so golden because they're young and they have youth on their side. It's like, oh my goodness, they are so stressed out, those poor little things. And so it was a lot of research and a lot of tears shed with various people and their stories. And what I hope that teenagers get from this book is, first off, I want them to stay. That is my first goal with this book, is I want them to just stay. Give tomorrow a chance to go outside that 15 minutes where you've made a decision to take the exit strategy, to take the door out, but just stick it out and see what tomorrow has. And is tomorrow going to be awful too? It might be. I don't know. I mean, I've had I talk about, there's a lot of beautiful things in my life in my past that I'm so glad I didn't miss. There've been a lot of terrible things too, that I'm also glad I didn't miss, because those terrible things give us sort of beauty in its own way. There's collateral beauty even in challenges and stress and sorrow. So my biggest goal is for them to stay and give tomorrow a chance. My second goal is for them to get help. I wish I wish that I had gone to a therapist and sought professional help earlier. I think that my life would have been a lot easier if I had been open and honest with myself about the things that I was dealing with, and then open and honest by speaking it to somebody else. I didn't make that transition until much later in my adulthood, and I wish I would have. I think that it would have been really beneficial to me, to my children, to everybody around me if I had taken a moment to get my own mental health right so that I could be a better support to those other people who also need help. And another thing is to just say something, to speak your truth to somebody, talk it out, find friends, find a good support group, find not just professional help, but people around you who, what I love about Winnie the Pooh
So
is
many things, so many
so
things.
many things. So many things. I've been reading a lot of Winnie the Pooh to my little grandbabies lately. And something I've loved is watching the friendships there, and how Rabbit shows up to the little tea party and he's like, well, where's Eeyore, everybody? And they're like, I thought he was coming. Well, let's go get him. And
Mhm.
they all go, and Eeyore's sad and he has sad days, and oh well. And yet his friends aren't, man, I hate having that Eeyore around. He's just the worst. Let's just leave him home. They're like, well, let's go get him. And let's go support him. Let's go. His house fell down again. Let's go fix it. And that's, I love that. And I love that if you've got a good support group, even when you're having Eeyore days, or for me, bad MS days where my brain's just not quite right and I'm not functioning the way I should, I've got a good support group around me that
Mhm.
they're going to fix the roof over my head, and they're going to hang out with me while I'm going, oh, well. So get yourself some good support. Get people around you who are going to just love you and want you in their circle, regardless of what kind of day you're having. Those are the things.
I love those 3 tips. I love to say that hope is the plan B, C, D, E, and you go through the whole alphabet and you keep showing up and pivoting. I think for teenagers, they don't maybe always have perspective. They don't have longevity. I think you and I have lived through enough decades that we can kind of see where there were tough years and then there were better years. And as a 16-year-old, I didn't have that long-term perspective. I was living some hard stuff at home and in my soul, but I didn't have the perspective. I love that you talk about the fact that we need you to stay. I often, that's kind of my phrase too, is to stay in your body. And these bodies of ours are not perfect, but they're a gift. And then that invitation to get help, and to get help sooner than later. I like to think of therapy as education, and no one's embarrassed about more education. If I told you that I'm going to go get another degree, you wouldn't be like, oh, that's so embarrassing, Ganel-Lyn. Why would you want another degree? Why do you want more education? For me, therapy is education. I love that Addison throughout the book is still kind of not sure. She's not sure about her therapist. She's not sure if the journal's working. She's not sure about all these things. And oftentimes in the work I do, people say, well, I've been to therapy and it didn't work. And I'm like, well, have you gotten a bad haircut? You don't just never get your hair done again. You crowdsource who gets their hair done and who do you go to, and you find someone new. And so I say therapy is a broad term, and there's a lot of tools in the mental health field. And there's even more now than there were 9 years ago when my sister died by suicide. And so I love that we're having these conversations. And then I love your idea of getting, I call them my faith friends, and the people like Winnie the Pooh that surround you with the honesty and the love. And I think for teenagers that can be hard. I think you do a beautiful job of showing characters here. Some of them break my heart. Like I was weeping as I was reading some of these experiences of your characters, of just how hard life is for people behind closed doors, and please don't assume. And so sometimes I tell teenagers, you just want that really good friend and you don't understand why you don't have that good friend. Paying a therapist to listen to you and be that safe space is not embarrassing. But if you want a good friend, be a good friend. And if you're the one drowning, I think it's important to know you can't solve your friend's mental health stuff. And so I love those 3 tips. And I just wanted to exclamation point all 3 of them with you, so that our listeners would kind of really see the value of, sometimes it takes time to find your little tribe, and time to find your faith friends that are going to be there on your hard days, and let you tell the song of your heart back to you when you forget the words. That's what I always say about my friends, is they sing the song of my soul back when I forget my own words. But if you don't have that friend yet, hold on, and if your friend right now is your grandma or your therapist, that's okay for now. because you will be the friend one day that says, hey, I've been swimming in that sea and I know how to keep paddling. And I just want to share with you what happened. I love where Addison ends. I don't think this is the end, but one of the things she says that just emphasizes what you invited everyone to do is stay for the ordinary day. Not every day is this extraordinary, horrible day or amazing day. And she says the day was weirdly ordinary as far as days go. I mean, nothing spectacular happened, but I feel better. Sometimes a little thing like feeling better actually feels spectacular because it means I'm still here. And I just think what a beautiful message to share, that we're still here even on the ordinary days. Before we say goodbye, is there anything else you want to share? Because I'm just so grateful you wrote this book and you've put your soul into this book and you pieced out the complexities so that we had words around this issue.
Well, the only thing I really want to say is just give tomorrow a chance. There are going to be better days. See past the 15 minutes. It's hard to do, but give tomorrow a chance. See what happens.
Thank you. Where can people connect with you and know more about you and your books and find this book? What do you want to say is just kind of our final little keep the door open connection to those
I
that are
am
listening?
not great on social media. It's just really hard for me. But the place where you can connect with me best is probably Instagram. I think
Okay.
Instagram is a happy place filled with pictures and I like that. So it's where I like to hang out the most. It's pretty positive. It's got a good vibe to it. So
Thank you, Julie. And thank you for writing this beautiful book. Thank you for tackling this difficult subject. Thank you for helping us find ways to hope on and stick around and stay and see that even when we're not our best, we're still a gift. And I'm so grateful. It's been a gift for me to get to know you today. And please pick up this amazing book, Swimming in a Sea of Stars. It's a beautiful cover. I'm going to hold up my copy so that you can see how beautiful the artwork is on this, and find your copy. Share it with a teen, especially. I think we need to give our teens words around these things and this issue, not just in September when we're really focusing on it, but every day. Thanks for joining us here at Shadow Mountain Publishing.
thanks, Ganel-Lyn.